Good morning, everybody. Thank you very much indeed for joining this AIRMIC webinar, which is being presented today in partnership with Baker Tilly and Coca-Cola European Partners. Now, the first thing I want to dispel the myth of that this is not the lovely Hannah Powell from Baker Tilly speaking. My name is Julia Graham, and I'm the Deputy CEO and Technical Director of AIRMIC. I'd like to welcome you also to the subject that we're going to be covering today, which, as you can see on screen, is an alternative way to handle business interruption claims, the central EU joint expert model and its application in other jurisdictions. Our two presenters today joining us from Baker Tilly and from Coca-Cola are Christian Schodzinski, and Christian, I'm going to pronounce your name wrong, I'm sure, but please correct me, who are going to be with us to work through the process. If we can just go back one slide, please, to the pictures of our presenters at slide 2. We could just move that back. That's it, lovely. So I'd like to give you a quick introduction of our two speakers today. First of all, Begoña Miguel. Begoña is the Claims Senior Manager at Coca-Cola European Partners, CCEP, and has been in this role for the last couple of years. She focuses on property, casualty and motor claims across 13 European countries. She holds a business degree and an MBA from the Barcelona University, where she's currently based in her present role. Before joining Coca-Cola European Partners, she worked in the insurance department at Coca-Cola Iberia. She has over 20 years experience in handling claims and risk financing at Coca-Cola businesses. I'd now like to turn to our second presenter today, Christian. For over a decade, Christian has specialized in quantifying complex business interruption and stock losses within the German manufacturing industry, working both nationally and internationally. Today, he brings knowledge of the claims processes as handled in the German market, as well as a detailed understanding of manufacturing processes. Christian is frequently appointed as a joint expert, providing an independent assessment while working with all parties involved in a loss claim. He has a particular experience on losses in energy generation, automotive, metal processing, machine building, chemicals and pharmaceuticals in line with the German industry structure. He's a publicly accredited court expert for business interruption and also covers related forensic accounting areas such as fraud investigations and product recall. Finally, Christian was previously active in management positions within the Bayer Group in Germany and Singapore, with a focus on product management, controlling and supply chain. Begoña and Christian, welcome very much to you both today. I'd now like to move on and just explain, for those of you who are online, how you go about asking questions. In front of you, you'll see on the screen the questions panel in the GoToWebinar console. If for any reason that console is not visible, click the orange arrow to expand it and it should become visible to you. Please do ask questions. This is an interactive session, and the more questions you ask, the richer it will be. Thank you. So now moving on, I'd like to hand over to Christian, who's going to take us through what the good business interruption claims model in his experience looks like. Christian, over to you.
Thanks, Julia. Hi to everybody. Today I'm going to talk about a Central European approach to business interruption, which is not better or worse than the UK. But the question is, how does an ideal EI claim model looks like? I think, be it UK or German style, it needs to be quick, transparent, correct, cost-effective, and resource optimized. On the right-hand side, you might see a strange animal. It's the egg-laying wound pig. as we call it in Germany, a sort of ideal model on the claims process. When we switch over to the next slide, please. As you might be aware, the typical UK-style BI claims model would be that an insurer appoints an independent loss adjuster, who then appoints an forensic accountant, the experts. The insurer usually has an in-house controlling, external loss preparator, and in-house technical experts. And usually the claim is being prepared and presented by the insured to the insurer and the forensic accountant, and hopefully leading to a claim settlement without involving too many lawyers. This works. This has been established for a long time in the UK market, and it usually leads to amicable solutions. But it might be a bit more complex and time-consuming than a joint expert model. So if we switch over to the next slide, please. Typically in Central Europe, it's not German, so it's Central Europe, there's the joint expert model, meaning that the insurer, the broker, and the insured agree on a joint expert in forensic accounting, joint technical experts, and they come up with a report, work closely together with in-house controlling, in-house technical experts, and hopefully reach an agreement which then can lead to a claim settlement. The key point is being here that the joint expert is appointed by all parties, and they work together closely with the insured, the insurer, and the broker within the frame of a claims model and a joint BI model. This sounds a bit less complex than the UK approach, but it's not necessarily so. For example, in Central Europe, only about 0.2% of all claims go to court. I think this would be something different in the UK and the US. So there's always an element of commercial mediation built inside. So this would be a short outline of joint expert model. One question which comes up later again is who appoints the joint expert? The insurer appoints the joint expert, but in agreement with broker and the insured. So this is a short outline. Then I think we can hand over to Begonia.
Okay, so can I just jump in there, Christian, before we do pass over to Begonia? So just to be clear, what you're setting out, there's more than one way to review and handle these claims. So having sort of set this scene and recognizing the fact that global supply chains consist of various multinationals which are sensitive to disruption, we're now going to go on and explore in a little bit more detail how those BI cases can be handled. So we'll take that example and look at the specifics of a typical joint expert approach versus the other approaches, for example, as used in the UK and the US. So I think on that basis, we are probably now ready, following your introduction, to pass across to Begonia. Thank you.
Thank you, Julia. Good morning, everybody. Today I will explain my experience in business interruption claims. This slide shows how we handle the BI claims. Our property damage and business interruption policy has been centrally placed for all Coca-Cola European partners' territories. All claims have been centrally notified to the insurer in London. The loss adjuster is appointed by the insurer in London, but previously agreed with Coca-Cola European partners. The loss adjuster uses a local loss adjuster depending on the experience and skills of a particular adjuster versus claim type. The London's loss adjuster tracks the claims through a central source. The loss adjuster does a first assessment of the business interruption claim. For the business interruption claim, the insurer appoints a forensic accounting in London for all CCEP territories. The selection process for a loss adjuster is, I'm not finished with I would like to explain the selection process for loss adjuster in CCEP. Networking capabilities, an extensive experience in industrial business, knowledge regarding local regulations, good relationship management, engagement with insurer claims lead. Moving to the next slide, please. Next, thank you. This slide shows who is involved in BI claim in CCP. Of course, the insurer, loss adjuster in London and in the country where the claim occurs. Forensic accountant for business interruption. Forensic expert, usually to be appointed in the country where the claim occurs. Broker, for large and complex claims, the broker always is involved. And when there is any claims in dispute, local CCP time site, usually to be supply chain, QS, engineering, property and facility management, legal, security and finance, and CCP risk management, loss control, and of course, claims. Moving to the next slide. What are the key items? We have to anticipate to avoid any surprises. We need to check the business interruption coverage, and of course, property damage coverage and limits. We need to know what are the exclusions, what is the waiting period, what is the self-insurance rotation, what are the limits or limits of the coverage. We need to check the insurer options, gross profit or gross earnings. The gross profit has a predetermined indemnity period, whereas gross earnings covers the period of restoring of the property following any damage. We also need to identify any increased cost of working or additional increased cost of working. The power of our manufacturing network hence always a focus on increased cost of working. To recover and maintain sales, the challenge of Coca-Cola were the volume of our products, stock holding, and external factors for a fast-moving consumer goods such as weather can create significant challenges in the calculation of effective lost sales. Hence, the fleet coverage to gross earnings and adjustable at the end of the claim. We need to secure whatever is the higher result. We have to identify the key stakeholders, internal and external. Understand CCEP business by the external stakeholders. Our manufacturing network can mitigate our business interruption claims, but in other side, we have to consider increased cost of working. Collaborative approach, work very closely with insurer, loss adjuster, forensic accounting, the local site team, and finance. Collect evidence proofs financial records, and any supporting documentation. From a claims perspective, having a captive involved as a reinsurer does help in terms of securing access to loss adjuster reports. Conducting claims scenarios, plus policy wording stress tests as a part of the program cycle. Moving to the next slide, who is involved in business interruption claim at Coca-Cola? First, we have to identify the stakeholders in the local Coca-Cola side. Risk management works very closely with the local side. Supply chain QS, engineering, property and facility management, legal and security, to understand what occurred and to know all the costs incurred. Our finance team, who provides all the financial documentation and information requested by the forensic accounting or loss adjuster. Of course, risk management, loss control. We notify all claims to loss control for any recommendations or actions will have been taken into account, and also discuss the lesson learned report with the local side team and the insurer. Claims, handle the business interruption claims end-to-end, coordinate and control the claims process, ensure the highest result for CCEP. Moving to the next slide, what are the challenges? Coverage issues, different interpretation of the policy wording, and maybe a local language versus master policy. Questions about the scope of damage. Engineering issues. Maybe the insurer thinks that the repairs can be done more cheaply or faster than the insured. Believes it's possible. Quantification issues. Maybe the insurer thinks that the claim overstates the actual claim sustained by the insured. Business interruption calculations for large and complex claims are noisy sometimes, the business interruption calculations. Lack of information, no evidence, proof, documents. As you know, if the insurer doesn't have evidence, they can't consider this cause. During current circumstances, COVID-19, not visit the local site can limit the claim assessment. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Begonia. Anything from your side, Julia? Because else I will just go to the case studies.
Thank you very much, Begonia. I would suggest that what we do now is I think it would be very helpful to move on and present the pros and cons of the claims handling scenarios, looking at case studies. And I think it would be great, Christian, if we could start with you and then covering this slide, and then perhaps after you have spoken, go back to look at a case study and a loss in Spain where the insured has had to intervene and appoint their own adjuster. How does that sound to you?
Perfect.
Brilliant. Off you go.
Thank you. I would like to present two case studies, actual cases which I've worked on in the last years, and one positive, one negative. I was working on a large automotive loss, tier 2 supplier in Germany, and it was an American company, and we worked with them, with insured closely. We came up with a joint BI model, joint calculation, and the crucial thing was that at the end of a settlement meeting, the US broker, US insurer came over to Germany. It was a 25 million loss. And we, being the insured, the controllers and myself presented the claim together as a joint expert, and it was settled as we presented it. So the US colleagues were quite surprised how smoothly this went, that it was a joint effort with less controversy than expected. As a negative example, I was working on an energy loss in the UK for a German energy company with a German insurer and broker. They had a loss, a power station went down, coal power station, and we tried to use the joint expert model with backing of the insurer and the broker. But unfortunately, this was not really accepted by the controllers and legal people in the UK because we were not used to it. So we had problems in getting information. It took very long, and it was also a matter of trust that led to a long claims process, and in the end it was settled, but not we had some conflicts to look for. It took much longer than we would have done it in Germany. Yeah, so that's no better or worse. One question which I would like to hand on to Begonia is which model works best in certain countries. So there's mentality, there's soft factors, hard factors, people involved. So it has to be a certain team which works together in all kind of losses, be it in Germany or UK. So one positive example, one negative example. Then maybe Begonia, from your point of view, what is your experience about the Spanish loss?
Yes, I would like, if we go to the next slide, today I would like to share with you my experience in one large claim which happened in Barcelona plant. There was a fire in Barcelona plant in May 2017. The fire started in the spare parts warehouse, and luckily the fire was confined in this warehouse. As a result of this fire, all spare parts, workshop machinery, tools, technical documentation, office material, third-party material were destroyed. From business interruption claims perspective, there were sources of sales. The production lines shut down during a few days. The contamination works supply finished products from other plants and another warehouse. In this case, the insurer appointed a loss adjuster and forensic accounting in London, and then they appointed a local loss adjuster. But bearing in mind that this claim was a large and complex claim, CCEP Iberia in Spain also appointed an independent loss adjuster to help us to identify all costs incurred, review the coverage to secure whatever is the highest result. What were the challenges? This claim was the largest and complex claims at Coca-Cola Iberia in Spain. This claim was the first business interruption claim at the Coca-Cola Iberia. New policy and wording for CCEP Iberia. CCEP Iberia always appointed an independent loss adjuster to handle a PDBI claim.
Yeah. Hi.
So, Christian and Begona, thank you very much indeed for your introduction. I'm just going to explain something too, because in addition to me impersonating Hannah Powell today, I just want to explain why our colleague Begona is not on screen. We've had a couple of technical glitches, so we're absolutely thrilled that Begona can join us via audio from Spain. But unfortunately, despite valiantly trying to get her on screen, I'm really sorry to say that we've not been able to manage to do that today. So Begona, thank you so much for completing your part of the presentation today, managing on your slides on your laptop and using audio. I think you've done a great job, both of you. But Begona, thank you very much for rising to that challenge. So what we're going to do now, following those scene setting presentations, is that we're going to look at how claims models operate, given local insurance best practice and company and claim size and industry structure. And we're going to consider what is required from an insured's perspective to ensure that they've got the best process in place. We're also going to consider as part of this the potential outcome, and we're going to look at the ideal process with components of all the process best practices. So perhaps I can start the ball rolling by asking Christian to consider ideal processes versus best practice and the other issues that we have set out in front of us. You're also going to have to explain that very curious animal that we can see at the bottom of Christian.
Yeah, this is again the egg-laying wool milk pig, showing an example of an ideal process, which of course is never real. Shortly mentioning, I think that we need to look ahead how the processes will look like in 5 years' time. It needs to be quick, cost-effective, correct, cooperative, and ideally digitized. There's always people involved, of course, but I think everybody in the end needs to have a quick and cost-effective process, because you as a risk manager in the end are paying all of us. You're paying the insurer, the broker, so the quicker, the less confrontative, the more cost-effective, the better. If we look ahead, I think a cooperative model like a joint expert also cuts on cost and time. It gives trust to everybody involved. For example, the joint expert is appointed as well by the insured, which usually leads to quicker resolution of conflicts. So we are being asked as joint experts, also being a kind of commercial mediator, to resolve everything which we can resolve except for policy issues. Policy issues are being dealt with by the broker, insurer, and the risk manager. And there, I think we have similarities to Coca-Cola's approach. We are being joint experts here, and I think Coca-Cola appoints joint loss adjusters. So they agree to the loss adjuster being appointed, and which leads to a better resolution of conflicts. Yep. So this would be an overview. Nobody of us knows how the world will look like in 5 years' time. Nobody thought about COVID, the black swan flying through, but I think we have to optimize processes and cut costs wherever possible. So that's a short overview.
Okay, so with that quick overview, can you just go into a little bit more detail, Christian, about who in the joint expert process then, just expand on who appoints who reports to who, and the conflicts that you referred to, how they might get resolved?
Yeah. As a joint expert, we are being appointed by the insurer officially, but with agreement of a broker and the insured. So usually we have met with the insured beforehand, we have worked on claims with them, and we know the company. Question is independence and accountability. Simply put, if we are not doing a good job, we will not be appointed again. So the ideal result would be that insurer, broker, and insured all agree to the results we had. This will then move forward to the next claim. Of course, there's always conflict resolution, be it commercial conflicts. This we are held to resolve by ourselves as far as possible. So if I have serious misgivings with numbers the insured puts forward, I talk to them 4I principle and try to come up with a joint solution. So the idea is not to escalate anything, but to resolve it. And yeah, this would be basic outline. But in the end, everybody can shake hands and everybody can agree to what was settled.
Thank you. So, Bogona, turning to you, I've got a question here that's been posed, and that relates to how can claims generate learning or improvement in practices across the business? So would you like to expand a little bit on that based on your experience at CCEP?
Good question, Julia. When a claim occurs in any Coca-Cola European partners location, loss control and our QS departments are involved. A QS conducts an investigation and issue a report, including the circumstances of the claim, actions taken before the accident, root, cause, and identify the actions that we have to take to strengthen the prevention measures in place. And also, loss control reviews the circumstances of the claim and identify any recommendations or actions which have been taken into account. As I said before, loss control works very closely with QS, supply chain, engineering, property and facility management to ensure that the prevention measures are implemented.
Yeah, I think as you work in several markets, jurisdictions, what would you see as the main difference? For example, handling a loss in Spain, Germany, or UK, from your point of experience?
Yeah, currently we handle all claims with the same process in all countries. But the Barcelona claim was something special and was the largest claim. And we always work with the loss adjuster appointed with the insurer. As I say, previously agreed with the Coca-Cola European partners. And also, if there is any business interruption claims, we work very close with forensic accounting.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay, yeah.
One more question which just came in is how to handle the black swan of COVID. Yeah, in claims. This is a very interesting topic, of course. In business interruption, we have to calculate the business plan as it would have been without a property loss and compare it to what was actually happening. I have one example here. It's an automotive supplier who was hit by a fire at the same time as with COVID closure. We discussed with them how COVID would have impacted their business without property damage. They had to close one plant in Germany due to COVID. We identified this and we came up with an adjusted business plan. So it's not magic, but we just have to agree on the impact of COVID. Yeah.
Christian, first of all, sorry for leaving the screen, but we're living in a real home working world, and I had somebody trying to knock down my front door. So to avoid that, I had to go and answer it. So I do apologise. I just want to come back to you both about COVID-19 and just to expand a little bit, because how do you get across the fact that certainly in recent times, and probably still now as well, that it's not possible to visit sites and therefore things have to be done remotely? And you sort of touched on that, but could you talk a little bit more about how things have been done remotely and what you might do when current circumstances change? Will the loss adjuster, for example, visit the site again? Can you just talk me through how that's working? And perhaps then Biona can comment on that as well.
Yeah, so we were working remotely here in Germany for about 2 months. We reopened in July. As you might have noticed, that the COVID-19 situation in Germany is improving rapidly. But we noticed that a lot of visits, which we did beforehand with insurer, insured, and broker, could be replaced by webcons. So going forward, I think that about 1/3 of all claims can actually be done remotely, and larger claims would only be necessary in the beginning, middle, and end to visit. So my impression would be that our traveling activity will be reduced going forward, which also leads to more effectiveness and to reduce cost. If there are some difficult settlement meetings, of course, you would have to meet in person. But as I mentioned, I think that processes also in BI will be digitized moving forward, which will also lead to more effectiveness.
Christian, before we move on to Biona's comment, does that have any effect on sharing things like working papers and reports? I'm assuming that all of those would be transparent to both the insured and the insurer, and perhaps issued to both parties at the same time. Is that the process that you followed before and during COVID-19? Could you sort of comment on that a little bit?
The usual structure in Central Europe is that reports are shared by the insurer with the broker and the insured. And there is a joint BI model. So everybody has access, digitized access to a joint model for extra costs and loss of sales. And it has a sort of traffic light system built in, so red, yellow, green. So what is agreed, what is still being worked on. So this ensures transparency. As a joint expert, we are held to communicate with everybody openly and share also interim calculations. So to answer your question, Julia, usually the reports are being shared and the BI models are being shared and worked on jointly. So everybody's on the same page.
Thank you, Christian. And now I'm going to turn to Bigona and go back sort of a little bit more focused on COVID-19. So Bigona, how have you been managing claims during the pandemic scenario? How has that affected the way that you're working?
Yeah. During the lockdown period for business interruption claims, the loss adjuster didn't visit the local site to avoid any risk. They contacted the local CCB's team, usually supply chain and finance, to obtain all the information, documentation, proofs, photo, etc. When the current circumstances change, the loss adjuster will visit the local site where a claim occurs and can complete the loss adjuster report. Yeah.
Okay. So, staying on the COVID theme, and happy for either of you to pick up this, but to what extent, and perhaps I talk to Christian about this first, and this is a question that's come in from our audience. To what extent would the insured need to agree restart measures and timelines with insurers, and how, therefore, potentially could that have an impact on business interruption costs? Christian, is that something you've come across in your work during the pandemic?
Yep. What is happening now is that with reinstatement, rebuilding of burned down plants take longer because the suppliers are partly in shutdown. So we would have three scenarios. First of all, that the rebuilding takes longer because of COVID. But this, as a rule of thumb, is not to the detriment of the insured, because this would have happened also without any fire. So if it takes longer now to rebuild because of COVID, that's how it is. It's usually being covered. The second thing would be that the plant needs to be closed down because of COVID during reinstatement. Then this would have to be deducted from the time period of reinstatement. So, because the plant would have been closed even without any fire or anything else happening. The third thing would be that the client's customers order less, but this would be deducted then from business plan. Because this would have happened as well without any fire. So these would be three basic scenarios which we came across here.
So perhaps, Bigona, I can ask you the same question. Have you in turn agreed restart measures and timelines with your insurers? And if so, do you have any observations to make about your experience in doing that?
Yes, luckily we didn't have many claims during the COVID-19, and we work very closely with the insurer and loss adjuster. And as you know, sometimes for large claims, the loss adjuster and to collect all the information take some time. And in this case, this is good because the claim doesn't close immediately and take some time to obtain all the information. And And I am happy with in this period, special period for everybody, and who the loss adjuster and the insurance handled the claims. I'm sorry, I can't hear you.
Yeah, we've been talking a lot about COVID-19 and the pandemic, but this would not be a session involving yourselves if we didn't talk a little bit about Brexit. And so I'm going to ask a question with exactly that in mind. So I'm going to sort of look first to Begoña and say, can you explain your plans for claims management in life after Brexit?
Yeah, from claims process, currently the PDBI claims are handled by local loss adjusters in Germany, in Spain, in France, in Netherlands, and then they send a report to the loss adjuster based in London. And I think so, from business interruption for claims process, post-Brexit, the PDBI claims management will not change for us, because we usually to work with a local loss adjuster, and we post-Brexit we will continue to work with a local loss adjuster.
Yeah.
Okay.
Christian,
do you want to comment on that?
Yeah, I think, Julia, you have been present in last fall in the German Risk Manager Association,
yes,
talking about Brexit, and this was the main result. Nothing will change drastically moving forward. What will probably be changing is that underwriting legal entities are being set up in European Union, but with a limited team. What might also happen, we don't know how Brexit will come about. If, let's say, the present teams out of London can still operate in the European Union, I think they will. But as Begoña pointed out, they are appointing local loss adjusters anyway. So to put a long story short, I think nothing much will change except for underwriting with legal entities here in Europe, and the rest will just sort itself out. If underwriting goes to, for example, Luxembourg or Brussels, as I think you're aware of, it might become a bit more local, Europeanized, Central European. So the claims model might move a bit more towards the joint expert model as we presented today, and move a little bit away from the current UK model of independent loss adjusters. Yeah, so this would be my impression.
Well, I think that leads us into a very good question that's come in from the floor, and probably looking at time might be the last questions that we can cover today. But so building on what you've just said, Christian, do you both imagine a future where a development might be from a joint expert approach or a process to simpler principles-based insurance contracts that contain some about adaptability to individual business interruption loss situations? So a combination of the development of the model, but maybe accelerated, shall we say, by some of the experience of learning during the pandemic and leading up to the final part of the transition period of the UK. what do you see on the future development horizon? And perhaps, Christian, if you could address that, and then Bigona, I'll turn to you and ask you for your opinion on the same issue about where next.
Yeah, I think that processes will be simplified because there's also a lot of cost pressure in the property sector. And I think when you attended last year's conference in Munich, Julia, there was a lot of discussion also about process costs. I think that the whole industry, being insurers, brokers, risk managers, and also experts, need to quicken up the processes and be more cost effective. I don't like saying this, but it will be driven by the market anyway. So I wouldn't propose a UK model or a German model, but I think it will be more cooperative moving forward and a bit more simplified concerning calculation. So it will be a more joint effort. So yes, I think that the market is moving into a direction of cooperative models, also digitized, which leans itself to either a UK model with, let's say, a joint independent loss adjuster, or a Central European model with a joint expert. So both things are working. And I think, Begonia, this is also one point you made. Whatever works, works. And you are quite happy with the process you are having because you can also influence the selection of participants, loss adjusters, etc. Is this correct? Sorry, I cannot hear you, John. Yeah.
I'm just trying to sort of avoid background noise where I am. So thank you for that. Before I go to Bigona, can I just ask you to expand on what you've just said a little bit? There's the FCA test case, which is going on actually as we speak today. I was speaking to one of the lawyers this morning who was off to be involved in this. Do you think whatever model we pick in the future has some reliance on the level of trust between insurers and policyholders? And I'll ask you that question, and then I think that's the perfect timing to ask Bigona what she thinks of the future and whether you believe there is sufficient trust between insurers and policyholders to develop whatever you think the future might look like. What do you think, Christian?
I think the trust is essential, cooperation is essential, because everybody wants to have quick, reliable, and mutual processes in the end and settlements. Being on the side of the insured and the insurer, it might look like we're heading different directions, but if we are being appointed as a joint expert, we have to build in the trust into a process, as I mentioned repeatedly, as sort of commercial mediator, and take everybody along. So, long answer to a short question, yes, trust is essential.
Yeah. Well, I guess it's fundamentally the whole sector is built on a foundation of trust. And I can remember from the earliest books I read as a student, the first lesson that was drilled into me was the spirit of trust. And that's what made our sector very special and very different. So I'm going to ask Bigona now in the final few minutes of what we have left available to us today. Bigona, your thoughts on the future and your thoughts on the importance and reliability of trust between insurer and between the insured.
I totally agree with Christian that with a cooperative approach, it's very important to ensure the best result for all claims, but especially for large and complex claims. I have experience in Spain with an expert, independent loss adjuster, but we have to consider that maybe if the insured appoints an independent loss adjuster, the fee may not be covered by the PDBI policy, but maybe yes. And in my opinion, I work very well with the insurer, loss adjuster, forensic accounting, but maybe for large and complex claims, maybe we have to consider to include or to hire an expert, an independent loss adjuster.
Okay, so look,
Okay.
we've just got a couple of minutes left, and I just want to do a couple of things. First of all, before I make a few final comments, I would like to thank Christian and Begoña very much indeed today for coping with the realities of life as we make webinars, the realities of technology that doesn't always do what you want it to do. And I think we'll probably look back in a couple of years after our pandemic experience at the developments that will happen in technology and think, wow, how did we manage 2 years ago with what we had then? So thank you very much indeed. I'd also like to thank the real Hannah Powell behind the scenes for all her hard work and organisation today, and Alex and Bissy, my colleagues at AIRMIC, who've been diligently behind the scenes today, manning the webinar and feeding through the questions. We've had a good set of questions, so thank you, last, to the audience, who without you, this would not work. Now, in terms of summary, seems to me there are some fundamental things that I think you set out very well, Christian, that apply whatever the model is of the future. We have to work in a more cooperative way. Risk doesn't operate in silos, and neither should we. So the spirit of cooperation is something that's true in whatever we look at. And I think we've learned through the pandemic that we can have that spirit of cooperation if we have the will to do it. Secondly, we want to simplify things. Sometimes our industry is over complex, and there's a lot of room to simplify the procedures, approaches, and indeed the insurance contracts on which some of those are based in the first place. Finally, digitization. We live in a digital age, and again, we look back in 2 years' time, I can guarantee that the world then will not be as we see it today. So all of those things are the foundations for the future. And whether we have a UK or a Central European model, and I do think, Begoña, you made a very interesting point about how this affects the larger, more complex claims, where perhaps there's some of the biggest room for improvement, and then the smaller claims, which may be at times overly complex. What we can tell is that those foundational parts of our future will feed in whatever model, or more likely hybrid of the best of both we'll see in the future. So thank you very much indeed again. We will make a recording of this webinar available, and please forgive me, because when we finish, it's going to be quite a short, sharp finish. That's not because we want you all to go away, but that's how GoToWebinar works. So when I say goodbye and thank you, we're finished for today, but thank you very much indeed again for your time and interest, and on a debate, Christian, that we will probably continue at the next GVNW conference, or maybe Begoña in Igrea or Ages. So thank you very much indeed, and I wish you a great day.
Thank you.
Thank you to you.